Welcome back. U.S. Vice President JD Vance is on his very first visit to India. He is being accompanied by his Indian origin wife, Usha Vance, and the three children, Ewan, Vivek, and Mirabel. The Vance family earlier visited the Swaminarayan Akshardham Temple as well as the Central Cottage Industries Emporium in the national capital. Now, all eyes are on the bilateral with Prime Minister Modi. Remember, Vice President Vance's visit comes after U.S. President Donald Trump imposed and then paused a sweeping tariff regime against 60 countries. It also comes in the wake of New Delhi and Washington holding negotiations to seal a bilateral trade agreement that is expected to address a variety of issues, including tariff and market access. As India and U.S. eye augmenting bilateral trade to $500 billion, the Modi-Vance meeting is expected to pave the way for deeper cooperation in various sectors, including defense, technology and trade. Meanwhile, India is all set to send a team of 5 to 6 negotiators led by Additional Commerce Secretary Rajesh Agrawal to the U.S. on the 23rd of April. Well, at this point in time, first up, joining us on the show is Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary of India. Sir, appreciate you joining us. First up, do you expect a monumental announcement from JD Vance Modi meeting?
Monumental is a very, very big word. You know, it began as a private visit and it has been now converted into an official one, and rightly so, because if you convert it to an official one, then the protocol changes and you can therefore receive him more ceremonially and also arrange calls on him by the foreign minister, the national security advisor, etc., etc. So it's a good thing this has been done because JD Vance is a very powerful figure in the new administration, as we know, and he's taking a lot of interest in foreign policy, which means therefore that with regard to India-U.S. relationship, he will be playing a role in addition to that of the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. Our relationship with the United States is now the most important relationship we have across the board. There are difficulties, undoubtedly. President Trump is very mercurial, unpredictable, and he has now put the cat amongst the global pigeons with his tariff policies, and India has also been targeted. And we have to handle this as carefully as we can. We've already talking to the United States about this. We had anticipated that these problems would arise, and therefore the visit of Vice President Vance is timely. This will be in addition to all the other conversations we've had at the level of the Commerce Minister, even the Commerce Secretary, Additional Commerce. The new Commerce Secretary designate is also going to Washington. And during Vance's visit, there'll be an opportunity to discuss this and try and steer the entire process in a way that we can, as far as possible, protect ourselves against the kind of concerns that we have with regard to the consequences of this tariff on our exports to the United States, not forgetting that the biggest economic partner we have today is the United States, if we combine goods and services exports to the U.S. And therefore, this will be an opportunity to express our concerns and try and build a scenario in which, while we open up our market to more American goods, in return we get something from the Americans, so that it's a win-win situation.
So India has said that no trade negotiations will happen at gunpoint. How do you see India's approach to this kind of a deal?
Well, you know, this business about no negotiations at gunpoint, this is not the, I mean, this can be said, this needs to be said, because we have to also assure our public opinion that we are not going to do exactly what the Americans may want us to do, because they will ask the maximum from us. And there are areas in which we cannot really open up our market to the Americans in the way they may desire, especially the agricultural market. This is an extremely sensitive issue in India. Uh, the Americans have made it clear that they want us to open this market. To some extent, we may open this up. Uh, there are areas in which we can do that. With regard to, uh, bourbon whiskey or high-end motorcycles and this and that, one doesn't see much of a problem. Even with regard to dry fruit and whatever, I suppose we can make some concession. But when it comes to dairy products, there are issues. When it comes to uh, genetically modified uh, uh, products, there are issues, and we can't really write on the dotted line. It'll be a process of negotiations. The Americans will try to maximize their demands, and we will have to then stand firm on some things and also satisfy them on some others, so that on the whole, it is a positive outcome, which satisfies the Americans and also satisfies us. So I won't take this business about not negotiating at gunpoint too seriously. We're not looking for a confrontation, and the Americans would be foolish to put our back against the wall to the extent on some issues we will have to say no. Uh, so it's a process of negotiation. Let's not get too worried.
And so, what, according to you, are the challenges in executing this India-US trade deal?
Well, the challenges are that uh, American demands have been made clear. The USTR, in its report, has raised a lot of issues with regard to the Indian market. President Trump has got this thing in his head that India is the tariff king, whereas in fact our trade deficit with the United States is much less than that it has with its other partners, whether it is China or the EU or Vietnam or Canada or Mexico. We are number 10, only $46 billion. Uh, and also, if you look at the weighted tariffs that India has against the United States, they are high, yes, but they're not that high either. And if you go product by product, there are products on which the tariffs are also pretty low. But the USTR and the American side wants to raise a much larger canvas of issues, not limited only to tariffs, but also the regulatory process, also the genetically modified organisms, also animal feed, which goes into dairy products. They want us to open up that. Then the whole data localization business. This they also want to raise, and the non-tariff barriers in general. So it's a complicated discussion. It's not an easy discussion. And therefore, think that we are going to have a multi-sector trade agreement in 90 days, to my mind, is not realistic. What can happen is that in these 90 days, we can create the basis, a realistic basis, a mutually acceptable basis for more intensive follow-up discussions, so that by the time President Trump comes for the Quad Summit, hopefully in September, October, or whenever, we'll be able to sign the first tranche of a multi-sector trade agreement.
And so, with Havur Rana being handed over, where do you see India-US counter-terrorism collaboration heading next?
Well, the fact that Rana has got extradited is a positive thing, and we'll be able now, after interrogating him, actually probe the depth of the conspiracy on the Pakistan side and the people involved. So that's a good thing. And this counterterrorism cooperation has been going on for some time. Whether this has been good enough, deep enough, broad enough, I'm not too sure. Because when it came to Stephen Hadley, or Hadley rather, whatever his name is, not Stephen Hadley, we didn't get access. We didn't get to extradite him either. And then when it comes to all these Khalistani goons who are running around in the United States, Panoon and others, we have yet to see what the American side does with regard to curbing these people who threaten India's sovereignty and territorial integrity and promote terrorism in Punjab. We have also seen how tough the administration is with Pakistan, because the source of terrorism against India is Pakistan. Uh, and in the past, the United States, while they have cooperated with us to some extent, have not put the kind of pressure that they needed to put on Pakistan. Then, when it comes to Bangladesh, there are issues that are arising, and Bangladesh in the past has been the staging point of uh, of insurgency against India. Islamist insurgency also, Islamic elements also are active in Bangladesh. We'll have to see how much cooperation we get from the United States. So I would say that definitely we'll get more cooperation from the Trump administration, because Trump himself has been very vocal about Islamic terrorism. Uh, but whether we get full satisfaction, we'll see.
Well, so terrorist gangster Happy Pasya has been arrested in the United States as well. Do you see that change when it comes to U.S. dealing with Khalistanis under Trump than Joe Biden?
I think so. I think under Biden, these elements were given a big room, to conduct their very objectionable activities. And there was a belief that, rightly or wrongly, that Panoon was being protected by the CIA and by the FBI, because he was saying all kinds of totally atrocious things and threatening Indian Parliament, the Indian airline, our New Delhi International Airport, threatening to blow up our airlines on during a particular period, and advising people not to travel, etc., etc. And nothing was being done. Now with Tulsi Gabbard there, the Director of National Intelligence, and we know her thinking and views on such elements, I think we'll get better cooperation from the United States with regard to the activities of these Khalistani elements.
So appreciate you taking out the time and speaking with us. Real valuable inputs here. All right, we're going to talk about this with our guests as well. Joining us on the program at this point in time is Ambassador Suresh Kumar Goel, former diplomat. Quinton A. Hitchcock, American political consultant, also with us on the broadcast. Ninad Seth, foreign affairs expert, joins us on the show as well. Elizabeth Laris, Professor Emerita of Political Science, University of Mary Washington. Pathikrit Pine, geopolitical expert, is also joining us momentarily on the broadcast. Ambassador Goel, I'll begin with you, sir. Thank you so much for being here. Sir, it is obviously very important to note here that this is a visit by the Vice President, the first visit after becoming the Vice President of the United States, but it comes after a number of tumultuous episodes of trade-like hostile environments which has existed between the United States and a number of countries around the world. Do you think when it comes to these hostilities and these biases and these frictions, India has any kind of an edge in whichever way whatsoever?
Thank you very much, Vinny. Good evening, and good evening to all the viewers here. Two things I would say here. First of all, I think we must understand fully well first that it began as a personal visit. It is a private visit on which we have put in a ceremonial touch, a protocol touch, and we declared it as an official visit. The very program, if you look at it, visiting Akshardham Temple, going to Janpat Emporium, etc., etc., it is primarily a private visit, and therefore we should respect the fact that for both Vice President Vance, his wife and family, their focus is somewhere else. There will be visits in the meantime, there will be meetings in the meantime, but those meetings will have a limited kind of a role in the whole case, number one. Having said that, we come to the actual contents of the visit. The real meeting, The real meeting will be between today in the evening between Vice President Vance and Prime Minister Modi. Uh, there are issues where there are differences between the two, as it is bound to happen between any two countries, particularly two countries like the USA and India, where we both have our own ideas of priorities for us, and those priorities differ in many cases, and therefore the negotiations are going to be very hard on those priorities and those areas before we come to a kind of an understanding or a joint outcome. Therefore, I would feel that while there are differences and it will take a lot of negotiations, conversations to overcome for these differences, this visit will certainly give an indication to our side about what to expect in the future. If not concrete discussion, there will be ideas floating around. There will be feelings. There will be feelers to see what India wants and what USA can do. I'm quite certain that uh, JD Vance will be able to reflect the mind of President Trump as it is at the moment. But I don't think that even President Trump will know tomorrow what he's thinking. He changes his mind so often. But within those constraints, I think Vance's visit is important in giving us an indication of what to expect from President Trump in future. Rest will depend upon actual negotiation between the teams. Our team is going to the USA to talk about the bilateral trade agreement, which is a very important one. And let us see what happens there. It's not going to be an easy process. And I completely agree with Ambassador Sibbal that to expect that we will have some kind of a deal in 90 days, impossible to my mind. These are very complex issues and they are not limited to just tariff. There are so many other ideas there. So there are barriers of all kinds. So we should just leave it there and let us see what happens. But the good thing is that both India and the USA,
Okay.
uh, they, 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 they have a conversation going on in a good atmosphere.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Let me also open Quinton into this conversation. Quinton, the Americans are being accused of being a little too overprotective of their economy right now. This is a charge that has been levied on India also a number of times over the last few decades. Do you think that perhaps that is an automatic platform for both these countries to understand where each is coming from, and hence the probability of working out something tangible that works in our favor for both the countries is quite a possibility with JD Vance here?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. I think we should also remember that this visit is coming at a very interesting time. I think it accomplishes many things, but perhaps the most important thing that it accomplishes is this sends a message to China that the world's largest two democracies can start working together and increasing their bilateral trade value. So I think my anticipation is that trade, tariffs, the economy is going to probably drive these meetings. I also want to point out, while this may be a personal visit, I don't want to call it a vacation for the vice president. I think there's a lot at stake for the U.S. I think there's a lot at stake for India during these meetings. So I think a lot can get accomplished. We look at some of the economic measures that the United States has been initiating with India over the past few months and over the past few years. For example, in February, discussions began that are going to start increasing bilateral trade value between the two countries to about $500 billion US in just the next 5 years. That puts trade value with the US up into the same category as China and Mexico. So that's a very significant measure, especially given the turmoil that the United States and China are having, not just economically, but also militarily regarding Taiwan and some of the issues in the Indo-Pacific. So point in all is that India has a tremendous opportunity with the United States, especially now. The United States understands that. The vice president and the Trump White House in whole understands that. So it should be very interesting to see how this plays out. But I am very optimistic that the two countries are going to just further their relationship and work very collaboratively together, not just in this administration, but moving forward beyond that.
Fair enough. Great points. Elizabeth, the importance of realizing that India is not a fair weather friend now. India is a partner to American interests, not only when it comes to offsetting and upsetting the advances which China is making, which is of course something that is perceived as a threat by the Americans, but also understanding that India is a juggernaut in itself, and nothing could pay a bigger testimony to the fact that JD Vance decided to turn this personal trip into a professional one, and understand that dealing with India is priority, especially when it comes to these tariff wars.
Yeah, the timing, of course, is very, very interesting. President Trump had slapped on India 26% tariff increases, which is huge, and so now that's been paused for 90 days. It gives the two countries breathing room to discuss where to go forward. The problem, of course, in India is there are domestic considerations. That is, India protects its agriculture to a certain extent. And so for the United States to put pressure on the Modi government to accept more U.S. agricultural exports is going to be very difficult, for farmers in India. Matter of fact, they were planning to greet Vice President Vance with a protest. But also at the same time, there is a Quad meeting that will occur later this year in India. President Trump plans to travel to India for that Quad meeting. That is the Quadrennial Defense Dialogue, where the U.S., India, Australia, and Japan talk about security issues in the broader Indo-Pacific. And so JD Vance, I'm sure, is putting his toe in the water to talk about, a bit about that right now. But your previous guest who just spoke, talked about U.S. and India kind of, allying against China. China just announced that any trade agreements that are bad for China in the long run, China will retaliate against those. So now when we talk about U.S.-India relations, we also need to consider triangular relations. That is U.S., India, and China, because China definitely is a factor kind of wedging in there.
Okay. Pathakrit, JD Vance is in India, and these conversations are highly important considering the fact that diplomatically India has salvaged the situation. India has also gone on to the extent saying that these negotiations cannot be held, Pathakrit, at gunpoint. This doesn't seem to be a conversation which is going to happen under a gunpoint. This seems to be a soft angle, from what I understand, that is being adopted by the American Vice President.
Well, Vineet, first and foremost, similar pressures were there in 2018 as well. But I think, that time also there were pressure due to CAATSA sanctions, and India went ahead and took the S-400 air defense system from Russia. There was a 2+2 dialogue, and India made it very clear as to why India requires those things, in spite of the Trump administration having sanctions for any organization, country dealing with Russia, Iran, or Korea. So let me tell you on the issue of the trade negotiations. See, there are the negotiations are about hard bargains. So the vice president, when he comes, definitely he is carrying forward certain message from the Trump administration. But I don't think just because he is here, suddenly the trade negotiations will get fastened or quickened. It will take its own time. So far as your question is concerned, look, it is a given that India will not open up its agriculture sector, poultry sector, fishery, dairy. There's no question of it. You might have some premium products coming in high-end departmental store. That's it. Nothing more than that. If the real concern of Trump administration is about the deficit, then yes, India can import a little more about of its energy requirements. But at the same time, look at what India is offering. That is also something that has to be considered. The Civil Liability of Nuclear Damage Act that India is taking care of, which gives huge opportunity for American companies who have up till now not invested in India's nuclear energy sector to develop small modular reactors. Organizations like Holtec are collaborating with L&T. That is a huge area for potential area for investment for the American companies. Second is invariably the new name of Initiative for Critical and Emerging Technology, where there are collaborations for quantum computing, there are collaborations for AI biotechnology. Now it is called TRUST after PM Modi and President Trump met. It's called Transforming Relationship Utilizing Strategic Technology. So of course, for future generation technologies, there will be collaboration. But let's understand, both Prime Minister Modi and President Trump wants manufacturing to happen in their own countries. So there will be give and take invariably. Now, if the Americans want more access to the Indian market, then India has two things in mind. First and foremost, yes, it has to take care of protect the interest of its own farmers. There are more than, say, 10 to 15 crore, which means 150 million people involved. The other thing is that if you want more access to my market, you also have to reciprocate and give more access to your market. That is one thing that I think will be made very clear. The other issue is, if you look at the larger dimension of how much the American companies earn revenue from India, then invariably you have to take into consideration the revenue of big tech American companies, whether it's the Amazons or the Google or the Twitter, or which is now called X, or Google or Microsoft, and the amount of revenue they churn from India. If you consider that, not just in India's case, but any country's sake, then invariably United States doesn't have a trade deficit with any country. You just can't talk about goods only and keep aside services. That is something that has to be kept in mind. So far as China is concerned, look, it is very clear. There's a realignment of supply chains happening. Many American companies would want to diversify their supply chain. Many would want to come to India. Most welcome, because there are many areas of convergence between India and United States, and it's a given. We share cultural values. We are comfortable in each other's countries, and there is no doubt about it. The Americans have given opportunity for India to thrive. No problem with that. But India will not get into the trade war between United States and China. Okay, and I think the Trump administration understands it very well. India has a very, very decoupled foreign policy. You can call it an independent foreign policy, just as United States is a very, very valued strategic partner. So is BRICS, which has been brought up with a lot of sweat and hard work, because we have this perpetual problem of sanctions being threatened on us. It has happened in the past. So that legacy, keeping in mind, Trump is very, very, let me tell you that Trump is very popular in India because he's dismantling wokeism. And many people in India respect him for that. But when it comes to the issue of, BRICS, I think India is very sensitive with that. India has never allowed BRICS to operate against the United States. India has never said that it's an anti-Western thing. India has always said that this is a non-Western bloc. And there's large opportunity for it to collaborate with the United States and Western countries as well. There's no problem with BRICS and G7 to tomorrow having a joint summit. And I think there are challenges India has with China when it comes to dumping. It has to regulate, monitor. Majority of the Chinese apps are banned in India. We trust American technology, but I think China is too big to be ignored at the same time. So if there are issues, India would deal it definitely on its own, as it has always done, rather than becoming a bloc with the United States and getting into that war, which it would want to avoid for the time being. So this is where it is. Yes, there will be certain concessions India would also give, because America is willing to give certain concessions. But can you just give me 10 more seconds?
Yeah.
I think we are not too much concerned about that 26%. Let me tell you why. Our entire export of goods to United States is less than 2% of our GDP, and the impact level is only $30 billion. $30 billion in its own term is big, but as percentage of a $4.3 trillion GDP, it is less than 1%. So it does impact, but it doesn't devastate us, because we are not an export-oriented economy. So India does have the leverage to negotiate. We are not under compulsion or scared that we have to do or we will get devastated. That is the standpoint for which negotiations are happening. Back to you, Vinay.
Ambassador Goel, let's also talk about the strategic and the defense cooperation. India-American partnership is also driven by the fact that there is a mutual concern with both the countries when it comes to China's growing influence on the Indo-Pacific region and regional security. What percentage would you give this particular facet when it comes to both seeing eye to eye, when it comes to getting along trade-wise as well? Ambassador Goel?
I'm on the mute. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Vinny, that's a good question. You see, the problem is that when we begin to look at India-China relations or India-US relations from the prism of the third country, we will always land into problems. China is our neighbor, both in subcontinental borders and also in maritime space. Please recall that historically we have had interactions, even going back to the Chola empires, with Sangha coming to the Indian coast, and these are not these have not been easy journeys. Therefore, we have to look at China not just as a kind of uh, country globally looking for the global power, but also as India's big neighbor. And that is important. And we must also remember that when quadrilateral dialogue was established, even though the idea first came from the Japanese Prime Minister, but the USA showed interest because USA thought that India's presence was important in terms of countering the expanding or growing Chinese interest, Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific. Having taken these two factors into account, to pin the entire relationship with China on just this factor could actually land us into problems. Therefore, when we talk with China, we need to be cognizant that China is trying to outrival us in terms of the regional influence, in terms of global presence. We need to be cognizant of the fact that President Trump, mercurial that he is, and he has been talking over the last 2 or 3 days about the big deal that China could offer to India, to the USA. And if that big deal comes, we do not know what the big deal is going to be about. But the point is that if Trump does think that he's getting from China what he's looking for, his adversarial position to China could get moderated. Therefore, uh, strategically, India is important for the USA from the point of view of China. But we do not have to play the same game and say that in this entire matrix, our importance is arising because of China. We need to do something more. Therefore, we say like global South. We talk about G20. We talk about the other plurilateral platforms, which are important for India's own strategic calculus. I don't know whether I'm being clear, but the point really here is that we have to play a very careful game in the whole thing and not let it appear that we are preparing to play the entirely American game as far as China is concerned.
Well said, sir. I agree with the point that you make and the term that you use, the American game. Quinton, there have also been a number of geopolitical differences between both these countries. There's strategic fragility, if I can call it that, between these two countries as well, which has more or less, solidified over the last few years, but it is not completely okay. The Americans have had a problem with India buying oil from Russia. India has had a problem with the tacit support that Pakistan has given Pakistan from time to time. But regardless of these differences, do you think there is perhaps a new leaf that could be turned over with Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi, sharing this incredible Born-Homian chemistry?
I think it's already been turned over. I think there's every evidence to suggest that Prime Minister Modi and President Trump not just have a great relationship this administration, but that they've had a great relationship since President Trump's first administration. Let's remember, President Trump has only been in office 3 months, almost exactly to the day. And the vice president and the president have both met with the Prime Minister of India. So that's a very significant thing to think about with the two countries. I don't really put much stock into the fact that, well, India gets most of their natural gas and oil from Russia. Well, so do a lot of European countries. So that's really not, I don't think, going to be a deterrent between the United States and India. I think, if anything, that creates more of an opportunity for the United States, which President Trump has made it very clear that one of his biggest complaints with a lot of countries is that they're not taking United States sourced oil and gas. So there's a tremendous opportunity here. I also want to say that it's not just India that has the opportunity. It's the United States that also has an opportunity with India. India is a rapidly growing market, has well-to-do consumers. And if you look at some American companies, very prominent companies like Apple, Google, IBM, Cisco, Microsoft, the list goes on, that are expanding their investment, expanding their footprint in India for that very reason. So it's not just the two administrations that are very, very close. A lot of American companies are starting to see that there's an opportunity in India. So the two countries, I think, are going to have a very bright future together, tied at the hip, at least economically.
Fabulous. That sounds extremely affirmative. Pathakrit, in fact, another concern, in fact, I would want Elizabeth to respond after you address my question. Of late, there have been concerns about, visas as well, that Indians are getting or not getting. There is also this matter of Indian students in the United States. Is that something that is likely to come up as a conversation between the U.S. Vice President and Prime Minister Modi?
If it does come.
Yeah, that's for Pathakrit. Quinton, that's for Pathakrit. I'll come back to you.
Look, Vinit, let me put it very bluntly. United States
and let me also slip in the way some of the Indian immigrants were deported.
No, I think that issue was taken up, and I think that has been taken care of. But United States.
No, but the people still being deported, Pathakrit. The people still being deported.
No, yeah. So that is a policy of government of United States, and everyone will have to abide by that. If people have gone there illegally, or if they are doing something which doesn't suit to the American interest, they have every right to take action. I think similar actions are being taken by India as well. And just as India would not want a third country or a second country to interfere into the internal affairs of India, similarly, the same goes for the Americans. I think the Indians will take up an issue or the government if there is a discrimination that Indians are being deported only and others are not being deported. But if there are cases of illegals who have gone there deliberately taking the illegal route to go to United States, then I think, even as an Indian, I will say I am against that. If you've gone there as a student, you go there as a student. You can't say that I have a fundamental right to stay back for my next 7 generations. That cannot happen. That era is over. So you've got to respect that country's rules and regulations. And then if they allow you to stay because of certain reasons, well and good. But if you are not allowed to stay beyond a certain point, then you can't say that you have been, punished or you have been treated badly. Any kind of, if you are being handcuffed, then I think that is something that is not good. I think those issues will be taken up. But I think India, being a country with the third largest ecosystem for startups in the world, I think if you look at the largest perspective of government of India, it would not be very unhappy if they have a far more restrictions on H-1B visa, because it creates the repository of talent to create startups within the country, which is already happening. Now, let me tell you 2 more opportunities if you just give me a little more time. See, the 100% FDI in insurance that India has now opened up, I think it creates major opportunity for the American companies. I think there are certain defense deals that can still happen, even though India is very, very clear that in the long run, all major defense programs will be built in India. Probably there's a requirement of a few more PATI Poseidons and a few other things. But on the larger context, I look at this visit as work in progress. We can't expect miracles out of it. Some of the issues will be taken up. Some of the concerns even of United States will be, conveyed perhaps, because I don't think a president or a vice president of any country is ever on a permanent vacation. So even when he's on a vacation, he has an agenda. He comes with a purpose. That is a given. And I'm sure issues of Bangladesh will be discussed. I am sure issues of certain other things. There will be many things, Vinit, that will be discussed that will never come out, that will never be divulged in the press brief. And that is how the meetings of the presidents or the prime ministers happen. Look, this relationship is not just about trade. This relationship is far more profound than that. This relationship, just as it is not just about China either, it is about the future of the largest and the oldest democracy of the world. So when we are talking about a 50-year roadmap, how it should be, there will be certain issues. There will be teething problems. And I think both the countries will try to ignore at times. or will try to create certain concessions for each other, but that will not create problem for the long-term strong relationship that these two countries have. And I strongly believe that the dismantling of wokeism or organizations like U.S. Aid that Trump has done, I think there's a lot of support for that in India. And that's another topic. I don't want to get into that. But the issue is this visit is important. And my last point is this. Look, we are culturally different. It is a reality. But JD Vance, Vice President JD Vance, having his larger extended family with Indian connection, might act as a bridge, because as part of the Trump administration, he would have a better understanding of how Indian cultures work, how Indians actually work. It doesn't mean that others don't understand. So because he, for example, if he visits an Indian temple, his understanding of Indian spirituality, his understanding of how Indians are emotionally connected to something is far better, perhaps, a little better perhaps than others. So I think that will act as a bridge in terms of the administration back in United States, while taking care of the American concerns, will realize that it is in the long-term interest of American interest to keep Indian interest in mind as well. Because as a country, we are neither a tool of anybody, nor we ever backstab. That is the long-term, or I think that is the ethos that we have. So I think this visit is important, but let's not expect miracles out of it. First, National Director of National Intelligence came, Tulsi Gabbard. Then the Vice President coming. That shows the importance being given, and that is why if there are small nitty-gritty problems, I think that will be kept aside. Those are not for the Prime Ministers or Vice Presidents to discuss. There are strategic issues that will be discussed invariably, and I think this is a very, very good, visit. India being a country with
okay, all right. Well, we are getting breaking news that U.S. Vice President JD Vance has reached the Prime Minister's residence. And the bilateral between the two is going to take place shortly. Focus is obviously going to be on trade, tariffs. This is a very crucial conversation between the two, and all eyes will be on what is going to be the outcome of this conversation between the Prime Minister and Mr. JD Vance. Elizabeth, let me in fact take a reaction from you on what Pathakrit said, that the visa issue, though may be a thorn, it is not going to be a defining motif, if we can call it that, between these two countries. Obviously, with Donald Trump coming in just 3 months ago, there is a lot to be crossed. There are a lot of milestones to be achieved. It will be extremely premature to judge what India and the United States are capable of in the next 4 odd years.
Of the U.S. India relationship. I think once the wrinkles, will get smoothed out, there will be a smoother path for H-1B visa seekers. Vice President JD Vance is in favor of it. Elon Musk, who still has some political, capital and influence, he's in favor. Wall Street Journal is. And so you look at the heavy hitters that are in favor of H-1B visas, you tend to think that the odds would be in their favor. And also, don't forget, of course, that not only do the U.S. and India share trade relations in terms of goods, but also in terms of services. The United States, will, in all likelihood moving forward, integrate India more into its supply chain, particularly as we can see U.S.-China relations deteriorating. U.S. is looking to friend-shore a lot of supply chains. A lot of American businesses are investing more in India. There's a lot more tourism between U.S. and Indians. Indians, I believe, are the largest group of tourists to come to the United States. The U.S. is the largest group of tourists to go to India. And so there's a lot of trade in services, I think, that can continue, that will further draw the two countries together.
Ambassador Goyal, yet again, India is not the India anymore which is going to fall under any kind of a trap. We have held our own for the longest time, be it the S-400 missiles or be it buying oil from Russia, and very carefully and with a very dexterous approach, for the lack of a better word, India has carved out this niche as a master negotiator. In fact, Donald Trump personally said the same thing about the Prime Minister, that he's a very good negotiator. Do you think, with a reputation like this and the ambition that India has of being a Vishwaguru, America is the only ally we need at this point in time, and making sure that our differences do not become our enemies is going to be the main priority for both the leaders?
Vineet, if you permit me, I would like to just go back to the last question you asked about on the visas for the Indian students. I know that maybe I'm covering some of the ground repeatedly, but it's important. So give me 1 minute on that really. I have grown through the 70s and 80s as a young university graduate. And I remember that when I finished my MSc Physics from Delhi University, one of the aspirations every young graduate had was to go to an American university, do his MS or PhD from there. And mind you, at that was the time when there were very few opportunities for research, etc., available in India. And the dream was that they will get their PhD from an American university and be able to work at an American institution. That was the dream at that time, and many got their dreams fulfilled. Number one. Number two, please look at the relationship between India and the USA. Not over the last 1 decade, but ever since the nuclear agreement was signed, ever since EAM Jaswant Singh began to speak to the Deputy Secretary of State, Trevor, in the USA on India's aspirations. It happened basically because, please remember, the very powerful, the very influential lobby of the American Indian, or the Indian Americans, whichever way you want to call them, who were able to cast their influence in both the Senate and the Congress, and with the Republicans and the Democrats. And even today, those lobbies continue to work with India in terms of carrying our own desires, our own aspirations. Important thing beneath is that the India-U.S. relationship, even during the days of the height of the Cold War, was not just a unidimensional democracy or anything. It was a very aspirational relationship, and the Indian youth looked at the USA as a kind of an ideal they would aspire to. Today, the number of Indian students who are going to the USA has declined by 20%, if I'm not mistaken. The visa issues, they are being declined. Today, the tourism from India to the USA has declined. Now, I'm not saying that the American government does not have the right to issue the visas or not to issue the visas. But the point is that those who are already there studying in the last year of their graduate course, and they are being sent back because they had a traffic accident or because basically they had a minor scuffle with the police. Most of these who are actually being deported, more than 300, they are not being deported because they were political activists, but they are being deported because they have a minor infraction of law, which can happen in any university. Therefore, my own feeling is that even though it is not the word you used earlier, monumental thing, but the fact is, it is an important factor, and I'm quite certain that it will mention not for just today, but because our relationship depends on the youth of the two countries. Having said that now, coming to the question that you asked about the strategic dimension of India-U.S. relationship, I think today, look at the world's situation, when we are again essentially descending into, or not descending, transforming into a completely new world order. The earlier order post World War II is diminishing now, is gone. And the European dependence on NATO, to my belief, has come down so much that even if they continue to have a NATO, it will be completely different, which may not have the same strong links with the USA as before. Middle East, see what is happening there. China and Southeast Asia. Some people say that despite Chinese visit, Xi Jinping's visit to Malaysia, etc., they are going to remain closer to the USA. I've served in Southeast Asia for 10 years. And I know for one thing that Southeast Asia, if they have not been able to sign a code of conduct so far, it's basically because they cannot escape. the Chinese influence. I'm using the word influence in a very minor sense, really, but it is actually the Chinese stronghold over the demographics of Southeast Asian countries. Therefore, in the new strategic game in the world, China will continue to aspire for the role as a world superpower. USA will continue to challenge it. Let us see what happens economically and in the CNP area. Southeast Asia, Indo-Pacific will continue to be the theater of action for this rivalry. Europe is losing its importance slowly, but let us see what happens after Ukraine, because that's a defining situation. So, on the whole, we are looking at a kind of game or a chessboard where all the pieces have been relayed in a completely different fashion, and the two sides do not know what to do again in future. Lot of uncertainty.
All right, sir. All right, sir. My colleague Brian is also joining us at this point in time. Brian, we just broke the latest between in the bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and Vice President JD Vance. Their meeting is about to start any minute. A ceremonial guard of honor is, of course, is what is on your screens, and the Vice President also visited the Akshardham Temple on the border of Delhi, Noida. It's a crucial meet, Brian. Lots at stake, and this visit, could be considered, a game changer of sorts, considering the fact that the world and India find themselves in the thick of the tariff wars. Brian?
Well, Vineet, definitely, this is going to be a very strong visit, and it will definitely strengthen the ties between both US and India. And definitely, it is a very anticipated visit also. Earlier he touched down on the Palam Air Base. Then post that he went to the Akshardham, he seek blessings there. He was there for a while now. Then he again, after that, he went to the hotel. And then very importantly, he also visited the Janpat Emporium as well. And now he just reached the 7 Lok Kalyan mark to meet the Prime Minister ahead of his visit. Also tomorrow he will be going to Jaipur, then Agra. Definitely this 4 days is going to be very important in terms of strengthening the ties, and also very importantly the conversation between both two nations, Vice President and Prime Minister, will focus on trade and tariffs also. Now, the primary focus of the meeting will be to advance discussions on a bilateral trade agreement, where India is even, Vineet, aiming to finalize the initial phase of this agreement by autumn 2025, which will very importantly include reducing tariffs on over half of its 41.8 billion US dollars imports from 2024. The initiatives will also be seeking to prevent the imposition of steep US tariffs and to double bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030. It will also be vitalizing and enhancing increasing trade volumes itself. They will be also talking about defense and technology cooperation. The leaders are also expected to discuss enhanced defense ties, which will include your potential procurements and co-production of US defense equipments. Additionally, cooperation in emerging technologies such as your AI or drone technology under initiatives like the ASIA and Trust will also be on the agenda. Very importantly, another very important that they might talk about will be the immigration and visa policies. Given the significant number of Indian professionals working in the US, these discussions may also cover immigration policies, particularly concerning the H-1B visas. India may very importantly also seek assurances on visa stability in exchange for cooperation on deporting illegal Indian immigrants as well. There would be a meeting that would also address regional security cooperation concerns, including the Indo-Pacific security.
All right, Brian, appreciate you joining us. We'll keep coming back to you. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to thank everybody who joined in and, in fact, put in a perspective that we can all use and perhaps delve over, because this meeting has just started. We'll continue to talk about this on the other side.